What's going on, guys? My name is Steve. Thank you for stopping by my channel. I'm just an American guy on a journey to discover my British and Irish ancestry. Today, we're going to be reacting to why Britain is the center of the world. This video was actually recommended to me by a subscriber, and I just thought it sounded really interesting. At first, I didn't really have a clue what this video would be about, but now that I have it pulled up, I think it may have something to do with Britain's place on your average map. I haven't really looked at a map in a while, but in my mind, I think I do picture the UK kind of being in the center of the map. So maybe that is what this video is about, but I'm still not 100% sure. So let's just go ahead and check this out. Why Britain is the center of the world.
Here it is. Here's the original one. I think there's this misnomer that my...
Hold on. Yeah, Britain's right. Yeah, I think center would technically be here, but I don't know.
Orange coated's dead, but no, it's just dying quickly. There's just a good amount of this going on. But I think this thing has a couple more years for sure. So, this is my desk. I sit here all day and I work and I look at this map whenever I'm daydreaming. I just look at this map. I bought this map off eBay and it was in like an elementary school and now it's in my office. I notice something every time I look at it that kind of irks me. That something is this. This zero. This zero, which is not just one number, but it's actually a corresponding line that looks like this.
Why is this the center of the world?
Let's back up here for a second. The Earth is divided into lines. Sometimes they're curved like they are on my map. And whether or not they're curved or straight has to do with this concept of projection, which I'm not going to talk about here. I've talked about plenty using a knife and a globe back in an old Vox video that I made. But just know that the Earth is divided up into lines, latitude and longitude lines.
Sure.
Ones that go up and down, and ones that go from side to side. All of these lines in the grid have a number associated with them. So for the up and down lines, there's a 0 point, and then anywhere to the right of that, or east of that, starts to go up from 0 to 180 with a little E next to it for east of the 0 line. And then everything to the left or the west of it has the same thing, 0 to 180 with a W for west, okay? That center point is the 0 point from which all east and west things are measured. The same thing for these side-to-side lines. If you go up from here, you're going to start to get higher and higher until you get to 180 degrees north. Or if you go south, you will go 180 degrees south, which is the south.
Sure.
Finding out where the 0 point should be for these horizontal lines is actually quite easy. The Earth has these two natural poles, which make for a natural top and bottom of the Earth. And halfway in between those two poles, you have this perfect center point, the equator, which is a very natural place to put this 0 point and to measure everything from. The up and down lines are totally arbitrary where you decide them. Like, who's to say that, like, it couldn't be right here in Russia and this could be 0 and everything could go west and east from here? Or...
That's true. I've never even thought about this, but it is interesting. You know, I mean, it makes sense that, like, I know that British sailors probably drew up a lot of maps back in the day. I mean, you know, go back hundreds and hundreds of years ago. So, and we probably get a lot of our current maps from those original British sailors, is what I'm guessing. I don't know for sure. Just that's something I believe is probably the case.
Japan, for that matter. Well, in fact, a long time ago, that's how it used to be. These maps with these grids were really, really important for navigating the world, and so everyone had to choose a 0 point. And most would just make their capital or their home base the 0 point.
Yeah,
it
makes sense.
Japan, you would just make Japan the 0 point, and the rest of the coordinates would be measured against that 1 0 point, which was Japan. And same if you lived in France or Washington, D.C. This was fine because back then countries kind of just fought wars and competed with each other. They weren't really collaborating or aligning or trading as much as they do today. And so everyone could just have their own maps centered around their place, and they did just fine. But then, around the 1800s, a few things started to happen that completely changed everything. First, countries and empires, instead of just competing and fighting with each other, started to actually say, like, we should align with each other and trade and be friends because that's better for everyone.
Right.
Pair this with the fact that map making and sea navigation was becoming like a big industry. It was no longer just the king ordering maps to be made for their like expeditions, but now it was like private businesses going out and doing things that private businesses do. And so there was now like a demand for good seafaring maps. In short, map making was trending. Seems like a pretty good time to be alive. Okay, and there was one more thing that was happening around this time that was super important, which is this.
Oh, real.
Trains everywhere. Trains were just like popping up everywhere. And trains were also trending. People were now able to travel like across the country, not just like on their horses, but on this whole system of trains where you could buy a ticket, get on a train, and end up somewhere hundreds of miles away. And you know what trains run on, besides coal, is time. Timetables, schedules. How do you know when your train's gonna arrive, and when it's gonna leave, and when it's gonna get there? Time. Some universal set time. The problem is, back in the 1800s, there was no universal set time. Check out this piece of paper. Today, all of these cities and towns would be just on Eastern Standard Time, one time zone. But back then, every town had their own time, depending on when it was noon for them. If they were a little bit east or a little bit west of here, that would be different than in Washington, D.C.
Wow.
Total nightmare for trains.
I never knew that. That's crazy.
The lifeblood of trains is time. And this time mishmash just wasn't gonna work. Okay, so what does all of this have to do with this? Look at this guy. You probably don't know who this person is. I didn't know who this person was. He was the US president that no one remembers.
Wait,
this US
what?
president in the late 1800s.
Chester Arthur? Like, I pretty much know, I can pretty much name most of the US presidents. But yeah, he's right. Like, Chester Arthur, that name escapes me. When was he president? I mean, wow, okay. Okay. I'll have to look him
Saw a
up.
problem with all of this. He realized that having a bunch of different maps with a bunch of different 0 points based on whoever was making it was a problem. And he realized that not having a universal time zone or some sort of universal way of making the same time for everyone was also a problem. So he invited 41 countries to come here to Washington, D.C., where I live, and to sit around and think and talk about where this 0 point should be. Where should the center of the world be so that we can measure time as well as navigation? All maps could be normalized to this one spot. So after a moment of a bunch of white dudes sitting around in a room in Washington, D.C., which is kind of what's happening today in Washington, D.C., they came to a vote. And that vote, almost unanimously, said that the 0 line should be right here.
No kidding.
This line, if you zoom in, goes right through London, England. It actually goes through a little outskirts town called Greenwich. Greenwich is the home of the Royal Observatory of the British Empire. This would be the place where the prime...
That is, I've heard Greenwich. Is it Greenwich or Greenwich? He says Greenwich. I think it is Greenwich. I think that's how it's pronounced, but I could be wrong on that. But Greenwich Standard Time, is that Greenwich time? I can't remember exactly how. I think it's Greenwich Standard Time. But okay, this started to make a little bit of sense. I have another video that I want to watch that's about the kind of the way the time is set up, like the Greenwich Standard Time or whatever. This reminds me that I need to check that video out as well.
Meridian, or the 0 point for the entire world, east and west, would start. Every country at the conference agreed that this should be the case, except for the Dominican Republic, at that time called Santo Domingo. They said no. They were the one country that didn't like this proposal. And France and Brazil actually abstained diplomatically, which was kind of them saying like, oh, we don't agree with this. France continued to make their maps with Paris as the center point, but eventually they got on board as well. So that gets to the crux of my big question of why the 0 right there, which is a bunch of people voted on it. But why were they so down with Britain having the 0 point being in the center of the world? Well, the answer is because it was 1884, and Britain was just really good at the ocean. The British Empire was by far the biggest, most powerful navy. They had the most experience with maps and ocean faring, and so it was kind of a natural choice to let Britain, the king of the ocean, have this center point. And from then on, maps started to be drafted with Greenwich, this royal observatory, as the center point for the east-west divide in the world. Over time, this exact point, exactly where it's drawn, has shifted a tiny bit because of better tools to measure things, and so it's actually not literally on the Royal Observatory anymore, but it's effectively in the same place that was drawn in this 1884 conference. But they also established that all time in the entire world would be measured against this same spot, Greenwich. Noon at Greenwich, at the Royal Observatory, would be the peg against which all other time was set. They called this.
Wow. I mean, that's really mind-blowing when you think about it. It's just, when you think of the way the time is set up, it's just chosen. You know, it's just kind of weird because it's like something I've never really thought about, to be honest. I've never thought about how we came up with our current time system, and it just, some guys got together and just voted on it, basically. That's so crazy.
This Greenwich Mean Time. So you end up getting a map that looks like this. Zoom in and you see Greenwich is right here. That's GMT, Greenwich Mean Time, okay? You go west of here and you start to get GMT -1 or -2, -3. You can come all the way back to the east coast of the United States, and this time zone is Greenwich Mean Time -5 right now. Sometimes it's
when I've had to mess with clocks and stuff, or like, I don't know, like when we set our clocks back and stuff, you know, I always, you know, see what time it is, and GMT -5 is generally, for most of my life, is what I've used, right? And I never had a clue why. I had no idea. That's wild, man. That's wild.
-4 if there's daylight savings, and daylight savings is dumb and whatever. But you get the idea. The more you go west, you go back from Greenwich Mean Time.
And then you go forward the other way, I guess.
It's the opposite. You go forward to Greenwich Mean Time. Yeah. So if it's noon at Greenwich, then this next time zone is 1 p.m., 2 p.m., 3 p.m., 4 p.m., etc. So these time zones have been marked up in these kind of strange shapes. Eventually, if you go 12 steps away from Greenwich, 12 time zones, you'll end up here at this mess. This mess is the International Dateline.
It's not even a line. It's like a squiggly mess. And anyway.
This is where Greenwich Mean Time +12 or -12 ends up at this line, which is where a new day starts. So let me give you an example of what this would look like. Imagine it's 4 p.m. in Greenwich, England, right here at this Royal Observatory. It is 4 p.m. GMT on May 28th. If anyone wants to send me a birthday gift, May 28th. May 28th. It's May 28th at 4 p.m. GMT, Greenwich Mean Time. Sitting, chilling in the Royal Observatory, which I've never actually been to. I need to go to the Royal Observatory. I need to go to the Royal Observatory. I'm going to do that this year, next year, at some point. Okay, so it's 4 p.m., May 28th. Across the ocean here in Washington, D.C. at that time, you can see that we go from 4 p.m. -5, so 11 a.m. Okay, so it's 11 a.m. here in Washington, D.C. at that exact time on May 28th. Head across the United States to the west coast of the United States to Seattle or Portland, and right there it's 3 hours earlier than it is here. You're now at 8 a.m. So it's 8 a.m. here, it's still 4 p.m. in Greenwich. It's still 4 p.m. in London. Now you head into the Pacific Ocean, keep going west until you get to French Polynesia, at which time it's 5 in the morning. You're now GMT -11, it's 5 in the morning. And then you get right up to this messy line. If you were to be in the Baker Islands, which is like a US, like random uninhabited island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, you would be at 4 a.m. So it's 4 p.m. over in Greenwich, it's 4 a.m. on this random island in the Pacific. So then cross this messy looking line, it's still 4 a.m., but now it's the next day. It's May 29th.
What? Okay, that's crazy. Like, I thought what was going to happen was that, no, I guess it doesn't make sense because it goes back. It basically goes negative this way, positive this way, or you know what I mean? It goes up this. Wow. Okay, that's confusing. I thought it was going to go back until like midnight, and then basically it would be I guess the day before, or would be the day after there. I don't know. Anyway, that's something I definitely did not know. Okay.
At 4 a.m. Here in Fiji, at the same time, 4 p.m. at Greenwich, it's now 4 a.m. the next day, May 29th. So we went from being 12 hours behind Greenwich to being 12 hours in front of Greenwich.
Oh, yeah.
Just by going over this international
this
line.
Imaginary line.
Do this exact same thing going the other way. Start heading east and you see that it's 5 p.m. and 6 p.m. and 7 p.m. Head all the way over into Asia, and now you're getting closer.
Now
to
you're the
seeing
29th.
How that 4 a.m. happened.
That makes sense now. Okay, because I was like going backwards, like left. It didn't really make much sense how it. But now I realize, okay, because you're technically going forward to the right and back up there, and then okay, wow. So that's so crazy. That's so crazy.
When you get over to Fiji. Now the caveat to all of this is, of course, is that some of these countries switch by an hour for like daylight savings type things and whatever. But ignore that. Imagine there wasn't daylight savings. Right now, in this moment, where daylight savings is at least ended in the United States, this holds across the whole world.
That's
Someday
insane.
I'll make a video about this whole messy debacle. But the point of all of this is to say that because of this conference in 1884 to reconcile train timetables and to make maps more uniform, we now have this navigation and time system that rules our whole world, and Britain is just sitting at the center of it, of course. The British Empire may have fallen and the world has moved on from Britain being the center of the world in a lot of ways, but it's still technically the center of the world in a lot of ways. I'm gonna put some links in the description for some of these cool tools that kind of help visualize time zones if you're interested in that sort of thing. But yeah, my question has been answered. I actually didn't know the answer to this question, and I went on a deep dive, and now I know. So now I'll sit at my desk and I will know the answer to why it's 0, and I think that was worth it. So thanks.
Wow. Okay. That was definitely something that I don't remember ever really learning quite that in depth. I knew about time zones generally speaking and what they were and things like that, but I never knew how they got their start, and I never knew how the latitude, longitude lines got their start. And it's really crazy to think about. It was just bunch of countries got together in Washington, D.C. in the 1800s and voted. Like these 20 guys, 20 people voted for this thing that we still follow today. And it affects every single person's daily lives, generally speaking. That's insane. That's wild. And all sorts of things that have to do with the ocean. My mind always goes to Britain for whatever reason. I don't know if that's completely accurate or if it's just just things I've picked up here or there, but I think that's the case. But anyway, I know that the British, they were really great explorers. I guess that's what I'm trying to say. They were really great explorers. And so I just assume because, they explored so much of the world, the Commonwealth, the empire went everywhere across the globe, and, they had so many colonies everywhere that I just assumed that, they were so powerful, especially at that time, that they just made these maps to be where the UK was the center of the world. But that's not completely the case. I'm sure they did draw their maps for Britain to be the center of the world, but the actual reason we have our current maps is because 20 guys got together and voted on it. That's crazy. But one thing that I still don't quite understand is, look at this mess. Like, you would think it would just be straight lines, both up and down, just straight lines. But I mean, these lines are crazy. I mean, they even go around borders, and sometimes they don't. And just like, look at this. Look at that mess right there. Like, it doesn't even make sense. This basically crosses over. Like, so interesting. I actually live near a time change line. Maybe about 30 minutes away or so from where I'm currently living. But yeah, anyways, guys, this was really interesting. I had no idea about this stuff. Like I said, I do have a video that's about I think the way the time got started. And so I'm sure that would be a good second video to kind of add to this one to kind of continue exploring this topic more in depth. But anyways, guys, thank you so much for stopping by. Please click that like button. Feel free to drop your comments or suggestions about this video or others you think I might enjoy checking out. And don't forget to subscribe to continue to follow me on my journey to discover my British and Irish ancestry. Until next time, guys, peace.